And as I do so, let me begin by saying that the appointment of this committee is obviously a matter which is in line with the Constitution and Article 152, Article 2. It is this House that has got the power and mandate to approve the appointment of those who have been nominated by the President to serve as cabinet secretaries. Again, of course, this is buttressed by our own standing order number 45. Madam Speaker, why I'm saying this is the notion that sometimes gets peddled out there that this House is simply a rubber stamp. Far from it. This House cannot be a rubber stamp. This House, in vetting nominees for appointment as cabinet secretaries, is exercising its constitutional duty under Article 152, Sub-Article 2 of the Constitution. This past 1 week, I was amazed to read in one of the dailies a notable columnist by the name Barack Muluka was quoted as having said that the president should be given freedom and leeway to appoint those whom he wants to work with, that there should be no impediments being placed on the part of the president choosing those whom he wants to work with. You know, Madam Speaker, the problem in this country is sometimes about intellectuals who, when they turn into apologists of the establishment, are getting their thinking wrong or losing their mind sometimes. Because nothing could be further from the truth. We are a House comprising of honorable members of parliament.
Member for Westlands, what's your point of order?
From both sides of the divide.
Madam Speaker, it is not a call for a point of order. I was just queuing to contribute to this motion.
Okay, then maybe what we do, there is 50 requests to speak and 5 interventions of exactly the same number of people, the same people in that order. So maybe it's just better to remove your intervention button and be on the request queue, because you're all there. And I can name those members: member for Tharaka, member for Mumias East, member for Kachiliba, member for Malava, and each of you are actually in that order in the requests at the top of the page.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Of course, I hope you will indulge the honorable member for Westlands when the time comes. Madam Speaker, what I was saying is this is one of the most critical duties of the National Assembly of the Republic of Kenya under the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Madam Speaker, the idea of vetting persons nominated to be appointed as state officers is a very noble idea. And if you want to know how serious this exercise is in some jurisdictions, you can take a visit to the U.S. Senate, during confirmation hearings. It is such a serious exercise that the Capitol Hill comes to a standstill when the U.S. Senate is conducting confirmation hearings of nominees appointed by the President of the United States of America. And us being a presidential system, in line with the U.S. system, we need to equally take this exercise seriously. So the point I'm making here is, when this House sits, and indeed under Article 152, Sub-Article 2, and Standing Order 45, this House in its entirety is the organ that does the vetting. The committee, of course, will do the nitty-gritties, but this House has got the ultimate power to reject or approve every single nominee. It's a duty we must exercise judiciously and with utmost decorum and very seriously so. Madam Speaker, you know, we have been told that the Constitution provides frameworks for these appointments, of course, as we know. But, Madam Speaker, even as the committee sits, the Committee on Appointments, once approved today, starts its sittings to deal with this matter. I will be asking the committee from the very beginning, and this is very important, that even as we look at the suitability or otherwise of individual persons who have been nominated by the president, you need to look at the whole package first in context. In context. Does it meet the tenets of the Constitution? For instance, we know clearly under Article 10 of the Constitution that talks about values, principles of good governance, national values. We know there are issues of equity, regional balance. Do we have a sense of that in the entire package? That is very important. Even before you get to address the suitability of individual members. That's very important. Does it meet gender balance? Does it address issues of persons living with disabilities, and so on and so forth? So that is very important. But when we finally embark on addressing the issues to deal with individual persons, we must not lose sight of the requirements of the Constitution. We must not lose sight of the dictates and requirements of the Leadership and Integrity Act, the Public Officer Ethics Act, and the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act. Madam Speaker, I'll be pleading with the members of this committee, and indeed the whole House, that we take it upon ourselves to interrogate, fairly of course, but very, very intensely, each and every individual. Each and every individual. Because, Madam Speaker, this country has a population of over 50 million people, out of whom more than or about 25 million are adults, who of course merit or qualify to be given appointments to hold public offices. And therefore, if the president brings the names of persons who, in the wisdom of this House, don't pass the suitability test, we are not trying to dictate the president on who to appoint. No. Far from it. We are simply telling the president that please, you have the time to go back and pick from amongst 25 million or so Kenyans those who can pass the test. That's what we are saying in short. And I'm not inciting anybody. I'm simply preparing ground for the committee and the whole House that when embarking on this onerous task, we must be alive to the dictates of the Constitution and other statutes that govern generally matters of governance and good order. Madam Speaker, let me say this as I conclude. Let me say this. We have been told a number of times, and we agree, that the Constitution of Kenya guarantees innocence. There's a presumption of innocence until one is proved guilty or otherwise. But again, if you look at,
member for Ugenya.
Respect for my neighbor and friend, probably senior, the member for Gunja. You're just in law school, so you couldn't be my senior. Madam Speaker, is he preempting debate on the names that could come to this floor? Is he preempting the debate on what could happen in the committee of appointments hearings? Because by going the way he's going, Madam Speaker, I fear that he's already made up his mind about the debate he's going to have when the names come to this floor, Madam Speaker. Is he in order?
Madam Speaker, I've been very careful, if you've been keenly following my comments. I haven't mentioned any name, and I will not, for sure, at this point in time. I'm just trying to lay the basis. It's my duty, really. It's my obligation to guide my members and everybody else who may want to be guided, that this is a very serious exercise that we must approach with a lot of seriousness on our part. Madam Speaker, I want to say this, that persons being appointed to state offices or public offices, just as the Constitution requires, must be persons whose conduct bring honor, dignity, and everything else that is positive to those offices. So I just want to plead, Madam Speaker, as I second this motion, that this is one such exercise that this House, once it embarks on, the country must be convinced that the House has done justice, not only to the process itself, but to even those persons whose names have been brought before the committee and the House for approval. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I second.
Honorable members, I propose the question, which is,